Along the North Atlantic, winter speaks in brine and pitch, gulls folding into the wind, ropes dark with tar, boats sleeping under snow like beached whales with stitched bellies. Tonight we'll drift through the quiet work that keeps small harbours alive when the nets are dry, cauldrons of tar thick as night, hands that waterproof rope and plank, kitchens where chowder hums, and paths crusted with salt and frost. Breathe with the tide, slow and steady. If these calm histories help you rest, you're welcome to subscribe and return whenever sleep keeps its distance. For now, let the surf smooth out your thoughts. Nights come cleanest in winter, and the harbour learns its ceilings. Between the headland's steady blink and the bell's low round note, a deeper map opens, pinpricked and exact, the kind of chart you don't fold but step under. Frost braids the wharf rails. The tide carries a shy, metallic hush. Houses along the hill draw their curtains and leave small, patient suns in their windows. Above, Orion climbs the gut as if he owned it, and nobody argues. Inside a kitchen that smells faintly of tar and tea, a sextant sleeps in its box like a violin between songs. Brass cool as moonlight, mirrors kept honest by vinegar, and a rag that refuses to talk about its other jobs. The arc holds its numbers in sober, in grave certainty. The index arm moves with a click that sounds like respect. A thumb warms the handle. A breath touches the glass. The instrument wakes without haste, built to turn distance into comfort. The almanac waits beside the lamp, pages thin as winter ice and just as trustworthy in the right hands. Tide tables walk their inked arithmetic down the coast. Sunrise and moonset arrive exactly on time. Stars take their appointed turns with the dignity of old neighbours. A pencil, blunt from honesty, adds a private mark. Star bearings to bell, bell to point, point to outer ledge. The page smells like salt because fingers do-dot on the step. The night has opinions and keeps them civil. A horizon is a fact even when the world is all pewter. The sextant finds it and holds it while the other hand brings a star down, down, down onto the rim of sea. The instrument settles when the star touches water, like a boat when a line finds its cleat, and the drum ticks a neat minute. Altitude recorded. Time noted. Breath goes white and then nowhere. The bell adds its patient vowel, a metronome that cares more about schedule than applause. Bearings belong to shore as much as to sea. A lantern hung at the end of the wharf makes a private range with a kitchen window up the hill. Line them up and the skiff finds the right water at any tide. In the rope walk, a nail on a post, a knot on a rail, small, deliberate marks, quietly agree with a star's position. Winter turns the village into an instrument, posts for sights, roofs for angles, the light for mercy when arithmetic is busy elsewhere. Back inside, numbers soften into soup. A sight reduction table, columns marching like a tidy parade, shrinks the sky to a single, convincing dot on a paper harbour no bigger than a placemat. The bell's interval becomes a note in the margin. W1/4 to bell, 4 cables, more lullaby than command. A slice of brown bread accepts butter and listens. If the sextant left a cold on the palm, the mug's handle mends it. Stories prefer constellations to crowds. That bright one over the point, Aldebaran, means. The nor'easter will keep its. Manners. Castor and Pollux, twins, kept. Us honest on a winter run when the light was off for repairs. The myths don't matter much. It's their steadiness that earns the chair. Children inherit names before uses. Uses come when a hand is big enough for the sextant's weight and the night agrees to be read. Now and then, the sky writes something extra. A meteor stitches one tidy thought from bell to boy and is gone. There's no need to comment. The moon lifts its slow coin over the ridge and turns the cove to pewter hammered by a careful hand. Frost feathers the window's lower corners into pale sails. A finger clears one, and the cleared pane feels like a porthole in a still ship. The light on the headland keeps time anyway, loyal and unsurprised. Charts on the wall learn the news in pencil. A shoal shoulder, discovered by lead last spring, gets its second underline. A margin note, outer ledge bears S by E from kitchen lamp, looks like a joke and isn't. Between the lines you can read Winter's thesis. Keep promises. Use small truths. Let distance become local when you can. The room agrees. Quietly, near sleep, instruments return to their nests. The sextant's mirrors stop thinking. The almanac closes with a thin, confident whisper. The chart loosens its curls and hangs straight again. Outside, the sky does not notice, which is comforting. Inside, the kettle turns itself toward tomorrow with a soft, corrected breath. The bell rounds the hour. The light walks. Orion shoulders the gut and keeps going in bed. You can still feel the arc in your hand, not heavy, just sure, and the way a star settled when it met the sea in glass. The harbour moves a patient inch on its moorings, the way a thought shifts before sleep. Bearings hold, not because numbers insist, but because hands and windows and hills and lights have agreed to be consistent. Winter approves the arrangement and, as a tip, adds one extra bright star above the point for the night watch to pocket. The cove is a half-moon of stone and snow, a harbour that knows how to tuck in its boats when weather grows stern. Masts make a thin winter forest against the sky. Between them, a different warmth than summer's rises. Tar heating in a black kettle, the surface thinking in slow, glossy blinks. The smell is steady and old, pine pitch, coal smoke, a thread of salt, an honest perfume that clings to wool and refuses to apologize. Fisherfolk move through it the way others move through incense, quiet and deliberate, sleeves rolled, breath white. Tar in winter is not an ornament. It's a promise. Planks drink it and remember to hold. Rope learns to shed water instead of hoarding it. Nets get a weather that suits them better than storm. The kettle stands on a tripod over a small, disciplined fire whose job is patience rather than blaze. A stick tests the surface. Too stiff, and it will scab. Too thin, and it will forget to protect. Someone nods when the shine is right, and a brush goes in, the bristles darkening to the color of safety. On a trestle, a dory lies on her side, a narrow ribcage showing. Pitch finds each seam and settles like a seal laid over a story you plan to tell again. Ropes coil on the wharf like sleeping snakes, some pale, some already dressed in winter black. A boy, hat down to his eyebrows, feeds a length through the kettle's lip while an elder, hand stained with years, draws it slowly along a board, pinching, twisting, teaching. The tar soaks, and the fibers change their minds about water. They will stiffen a little in the cold, true, but in the great wet, they will hold, and that is what winter asks of everything. Learn to hold without becoming hard. The boy watches the rope take its dark, serviceable halo and feels taller by a rung nearby. Nets hang like frozen waterfalls, their lead lines sleeping in buckets. Cork floats a pale punctuation along the edge. Some nets spend the winter with a tar bath of their own, dipped and lifted, the rhythm as gentle as breath. The excess drips onto boards that already know this work. Come spring, those boards will become kindling, and even the drips will have done their share of warming the harbour. Tools here are patient students of reuse. The tide keeps its arithmetic at the edge of things, a 2-beat shuffle over shingle, a 3-beat tap against pilings furred with ice. Gull tracks scribble the snow like half-hearted notes. A cat's neat punctuation crosses them and disappears beneath a skiff. The boats, relieved of masts and sails, wear winter spars and lashings. Their names, painted in sober letters on bows and sterns, look like quiet prayers you can read from the wharf. A brush passes over one name to freshen a letter, tar making the stroke permanent as sleep inside the shed. Heat gathers in the low rafters. Wool mitts steam gently on a peg, and an oilskin glows like a wet leaf in lantern light. A pot the size of a helmet holds coffee strong enough to argue with the cold. Someone cuts slices from a loaf and sets them on a hot plate until they think of toast. Talk is unhurried and practical, a plank that will need sistering, a nail-sick seam that wants a splint of oakum and pitch. The rumour of a nor'easter on Tuesday that will change no one's plan but will cause all to nod. The mood is that winter kind of hopeful, the kind that means to be ready. When the kettle's throat begins to thicken with cooled tar, it is lifted from the fire and set into snow to sleep. The brush stands bristledown in a jar of kerosene like a reed in a winter pond. The dory is turned upright again. The rope coils are stacked in black, tidy spirals that look like the harbour has learned calligraphy. A girl arrives with a tin pail from home. Chowder inside presses its breath against the lid. A clean board becomes a bench. Spoons knock softly. The sea is not invited because it is everywhere. By mid-afternoon. The light has the colour of pewter and the sound of wool. A man taps a seam with his hammer's round face, listening for the note that says tight. Another drives a corking iron into oakum with small persuasive blows, the tarred fibres settling like good advice. From the end of the wharf, a fog bell lifts its voice just once, as if clearing its throat for weather that may or may not arrive. The kettles are cleaned with snow. Hands are cleaned with snow. Boots are cleaned with snow. Winter is generous with the one thing it has plenty of. At dusk, the harbour turns to a drawing done with a soft pencil. Window squares glow along the houses that climb the hill. The shed door is pulled nearly shut, holding a slice of lamplight like a bookmark. The boats, dark, tar-scented, ready, sleep closer to water than people do. Tomorrow will bring the same gentle arithmetic. Heat, brush, mend, coil, sip, laugh once, go quiet again. The sea, listening, rolls a shoulder and agrees to wait a little while longer. The rope walk is a horizon indoors, a single, narrow building that seems too long for its own patience, stretching from road to wharf like a low, wooden sentence. In summer, doors at both ends stand open and the sea breathes through. In winter, the doors are half-lidded, and heat pools where the braziers glow. You step inside and the air changes. Salt lessens, wood deepens, and a ribbon of pine pitch rides the warmth like a memory of sap running under bark. Along the central lane, hooks and whirls wait with the serenity of tools that have exactly one job and do it for decades. Rope begins as hair-thin seriousness. Hanks of hemp or manila, combed and teased, lie in tidy clouds that show every draft. Men and women with tar on their cuffs pull the fibres into yarns, the yarns into strands, and the strands into something that can argue politely with weather. A wheel at the far end, small as a shoulder, big as a moon depending on your distance, turns with a steady, conversational hum. The twist walks down the building faster than footsteps, gathering the fibres into strength. The floorboards sing a light, regular song under boots. Someone adds a pinch of pitch with 2 fingers and the smell becomes briefly woodland, then harbour again. Winter requires slowness, and the rope walk is good at that language. Cold stiffens fibres. Hands answer by warming them first, palms rubbed, skeins tucked under jacket for a minute, breath offered like a small prayer. Strands, once coaxed, accept the turn and begin to think as one. You can feel the rope's purpose change under the twist. It stops being a collection of lines and becomes a single, obedient sentence that can hold a boat against a tide without complaining. When a length reaches its measure, it is laid aside still warm from the work, looped like a sleeping seal on the bench, near the windows, panes fogged into geometry. Oakum work keeps its own winter rhythm. Oakum is a humble thing, the patient picking of old rope into loose, tar-hungry hair. A knife opens a cut length. A fid persuades. Fingers finish what the blade began. It's work for good talk and long afternoons, and the tar brazier makes a low dome of warmth around the stools. Kids are drafted for this when they're old enough not to feed their mittens to the pitch, and old enough to understand that a seam's best friend is a clean handful of oakum, tamped with care, then sealed with heat. In spring, the caulker's hammer will speak a quick tattoo along hulls. And these picked fibres will become the difference between a boat that weeps and a boat that hums. Hooks travel the rope walk's length like polite comets, each carrying a bundle of tasks. A gauge passes measuring marks into a new coil. A splice teaches 2 ends to forget they were separate. Short splice for bulk and honesty, long splice for grace. The teacher's hands show a path the eye can't hold at once. Tuck, turn, dress, snug. A boy tries, fails, tries again. The rope forgives, because rope remembers being weaker than it looks. When he gets it, the whole shed seems to nod, even the wheel outside. The nor'easter rumoured yesterday practices on the harbour mouth, roughing the water without committing to a beating. In here, the storm becomes a reason, not a threat. Thick hawsers are ordered in fathoms that sound like prayer beads. Sidelines and bow lines multiply on the racks like winter birds. Smaller, tar-dark lanyards, polite as punctuation, will later keep blocks tidy and sails honest when the season permits them again. Each coil is tagged with chalk in a script that can be read with a glove on. There is a chowder interval. Tin bowls appear, heavy spoons, a heel of bread that has seen both the rope walk and the net loft. Steam climbs into sawdust and falls back as good company. The brazier pops a single seed of pitch. The wheel is chocked for 15 minutes that stretch kindly into 20. Someone tells the story of the winter the wheel froze and had to be coaxed awake with lanterns lined along the lane like a runway for patients. Laughter is quiet, the building prefers low notes, and the talk returns to splice counts and orders due before the hard freeze. When the wheel turns again, the light has gone pewter. The last length of the day grows under careful eyes, 3 strands agreeing in a slow spiral that looks inevitable once it exists. A palm guard squeaks its leather whisper. A marlin spike tucks a truth into the lay. The rope is dressed by hand so it won't snag on a cold, hurried morning. Someone wipes a smear of tar from a plank with snow kept in a bucket by the door. Winter's universal solvent for mistakes that are not moral. Coils go out on a small sled. Their black sheen taking the weak daylight like oil on water. The sled runners ride a clean, parallel thought down to the wharf. There, a dory that drank pitch yesterday receives a new bowline. The knot is tied with a courtesy loop that will be grateful to be found by numb fingers on a bad day. The coil's tail is seized and trimmed. The rope lies quietly, already knowing the shape of its duties. Evening sets the rope walk in amber. Wheels stop, hooks rest, cords hang with the stillness of instruments asleep between concerts. The pitch pot is capped. Its breath thins and disappears. Stray fibers are swept into a generous pile that will be pressed to service as tomorrow's fire start. Gloves are turned thumb out to dry. Aprons are lifted by their straps and left like flags of honest work. The long shed holds its breath and keeps its warmth a little while for the mice. You step back into the crooked dusk. The harbour smells of iron and brine. The shed still holds its woodland note. Snow lands on the top of your cap and stays. Down on the floats, ropes knock their wooden cleats with the patient sound of boats asleep. Somewhere a bell answers the tide. You carry the day's last coil over your shoulder, its weight certain but friendly, and the path to home feels short, like a sentence that ends exactly where it should. The tide chooses the hour and everyone agrees. Frost sits on the skids like powdered chalk. A block and tackle clears its throat. A dory's bigger cousin, her paint worn to salt-soft blues, rides in slow, obedient to a rope that knows the shape of winter. She settles onto the ways with a sigh that sounds like relief. Keel finding wood, hull finding stillness, water letting go without sulking. Steam unbuttons itself from her seams where yesterday's sun lingered. Gulls hop once and lose interest. Caulking day has the dignity of a chore that keeps promises. Tools come out of their canvas roll with the familiarity of family, caulking irons in 3 widths. A reefing iron for persuading old oakum to move on. A caulker's mallet whose wooden head speaks in warm, round syllables. The irons catch lamplight like quiet cutlery. A small brazier of pitch begins its patient simmer, the surface winking now and then, pine's memory rising to the nose like a story you've heard before and still enjoy. A pot of coffee lives beside it, black as a harbour at 2 in the morning. First, the hull is red like a long letter. Palms run along planks that winter has tightened into new opinions. A seam that gaped in August is a polite line now. Another, near the garboard strake, asks for attention with a slight, salt-crusted frown. A reefing iron, narrow and serious, walks that line. Old oakum loosens in soft, tarry curls and falls into a waiting pan that will later help the fire think. The plank edges, clean again, show their grain as if the boat had rolled up her sleeves. Fresh oakum smells faintly of pine and long afternoons. It is teased into a length that looks too airy to matter and is then folded into the seam with the lightest persuasion of the narrow iron. Tap, move, tap, move. The mallet does not strike. It converses. Shallow at first, then truer, the fibers seat themselves like a well-mannered crowd taking pews. A wider iron follows, dressing the line to depth. The seam accepts its winter bedding without drama. Along the chine the rhythm changes, a shorter cadence where curve resists, a rest where a fastening asks to be considered. Time is measured not in minutes but in feet of hull that have learned to be quiet again. Pitch is next, not slathered but spoken. A brush is blunt as a thumb carries heat into the seam, and the surface darkens to a friendly gloss. Pitch loves oakum the way tea loves a cup. Together they become more than either. Snowflakes land on the fresh work and vanish with the smallest sigh. Down at the stem, copper tacks show their tidy heads, each a bright freckle in winter light, proof that last year's refastening still thinks well of itself. A bung gets pared smooth with 3 silent strokes. The shaving rises like a ribbon and curls asleep in a pocket. The boat stories surface under your hands. Hear a scar from a hurried landing in fog. There a drinking seam from the season the river ran cruel with spring. A thwart that was replaced the day the boy earned his first splice. None of it is tragic. All of it is continuity. The hull has been new enough times to know better than to brag about it. Under the keel, a sled runner waits for the homeward haul. Its rope laid in a long, easy S over clean snow lunch is a pause that smells of chowder and wool. A plank becomes a bench. Bowls steam. Biscuits trade hands with the stubborn weight of mittens still on. Talk is winter talk. Modest, factual, a little funny. Someone tells how a mallet split on a February morning and the handle, freed of duty, hopped cheerfully into the pitch like a gull into bait. The brazier approves with one soft pop. Afternoon light goes pewter and then more pewter. Corked seams multiply like lines on a calm sea. The sound of the mallet, low, persuasive, beats out the hours. Now and then the harbour answers with a single bell that drifts past like advice you already plan to take. Frost grows on the unworked side of the hull, a delicate fernwork that will be gone at first brush in the morning. The last seam at the transom drinks its pitch with a grateful gleam. Tide returns to fetch what it left. Skids are salted with sand for the hint of grit that a safe launch loves. The rope straightens. The hull nods. Water meets wood with an old friend's handshake. For a minute the boat floats heavier, not because she is burdened but because she trusts herself again. Lines are made fast. The bow sits quiet. The name on her stern, paint freshened in a single letter where a gull pecked, looks pleased with its work. Evening gathers nets and tools back into their role. Irons are wiped with an oil rag that remembers many hulls. The mallet sleeps on its side. Oakum is tucked safe from cats who think it nesting. The pitch pot dims to a dark, thoughtful mirror. Down the wharf, rope coils wear small hats of new snow. The shed door keeps one finger of light in the world and then closes it gently. The sea and the boat resume their long conversation, warmer by a seam's width everywhere, quiet in ways you can hear. Houses along the headland keep their own tide tables, kettles that come to a near boil at noon, ovens that breathe out at 4, lamps trimmed as dusk rehearses on the water. Inside, winter meals more the day. The door swings shut on brine and pitch and opens onto chowder breath, milk and onion, a square of salt pork giving a quiet sermon in the pot. Potatoes soften to small, convincing islands. Cod flakes part like pages turned with mittened fingers. Steam fogs the window into a pale map of the bay, and someone draws a crescent in it with a sleeve just to see the harbour again. Salt cod begins in the barrel, honest and pale as driftwood, a topography of cure. It soaks in a pan where the water turns faintly historical, telling the story of last summer sun. A second soak, then poaching that respects the fish's wish to stay itself. Bits become brandade on hardtack, mashed with cream until spreadable warmth, while larger pieces settle into chowder with the patience of old rope. A slab keeps back for Friday, when the skillet will remember butter and a squeeze of lemon someone hid from January. The pantry knows more weather than the sky. Crocks line up like low, white boys, pickled beets that shine like small sunsets. Mustard pickles in their mild, bright armour. Applesauce that smells like October agreeing to be useful in February. Molasses stands like a dark lighthouse at the back, poured into gingerbread that rises slow and steady as a tide. Brown bread is steamed in a coffee tin that learned to be a mould. The lid rattles once, then behaves. When the tin tips, a cylinder emerges striped by its own steam, sliced into medallions that expect butter because butter makes winter shorter. Loaves and biscuits travel daily routes. A pan of Johnny cake cools on the sill where the draft persuades it into firm slices. A round of soda bread wears a flower cross like a compass rose. Biscuit split with an earnest sigh and accepts salt pork gravy without blushing. A child is deputized to test doneness by ear, thump the bottom of the loaf and listen for hollow like a dry boat. The kitchen appreciates such science. Lanolin lives in the wool that dries by the stove, and the room smells faintly of sheep and sea and the tar that always comes home on cuffs. A bar of brown soap sits by the basin, rough scented with pine and something like rope, its lather clean enough to make hands remember they are hands and not just tools. Oilskins hang like sleeping fish over a chairback. A length of line, newly dressed, coils on a peg where it warms its memory of the kettle steam and forgets to be stiff. Dinner plates are charts of comfort. Chowder in deep bowls, white with pale gold islands of butter. Brown bread circles riding alongside. Pickles bright as buoys to keep taste from drifting. Tea is poured in the quiet key the house prefers, a thin ribbon of heat that does not alarm the night. Conversation tacks and falls with the stove's heartbeat, a seam set tight today. A rumour of a window in the weather. A spool of tarred marlin running low. No one hurries. The ocean is patient. The table can be, too, between courses. Someone steps out to split a little kindling. The axe says yes with a single, agreeable crack, and the wind brings in a line of gulls like commas. The lamp is trimmed with a practiced pinch. The globe clears its throat and becomes a small sun. Outside, the bell on the point lifts a note and lets it ride the dark. Inside, a spoon touches the side of a bowl with a sound that means this is exactly enough. A book is opened and read for 2 pages and then left face down. Not from boredom but from warmth, dessert is winter's signature, gingerbread with a quick, bright tongue of lemon sauce. Or apples baked with their own sweet patience, a cardinal of cinnamon perched on top. Children negotiate for 2 raisins more and pledge to carry coal tomorrow. A slice is wrapped for the neighbour who sent word about a good barrel of herring coming up the coast. The kitchen's ledger balances without numbers. After the washing up, plates stand like clean moons in the rack. The stove door yawns and shuts its iron mouth with satisfaction. A kettle is left full and thoughtful for morning. The table collects small hardware, the palm guard, a marlin spike, a whistle found in a pocket and dried, and in their company the house feels as seaworthy as any boat. When the lamp goes low, the room keeps its shape by memory. Chair, hook, coil, loaf, the black square of night filled with tide sound upstairs, quilts smell faintly of salt air and soap. Down the hill, the wharf remembers footsteps until snow writes over them again. The last spoon rests where it belongs. The sea breathes in its sleep. And the house, tar fragrant at the cuff, butter soft at the crumb, holds its small harbour of warmth until morning. The net loft is a winter sky held indoors. Beams run like shorelines, and from them hang long, dark curtains of mesh, lead at the foot, cork at the brow, sleeping seas waiting to be mended back into language. The room has the salt-soft smell of rope and old blizzards melted off boots. Tar hums low in the timbers. Sawdust remembers summer. Light comes long and slant through salt-scuffed panes, enough to make needles shine and to turn each loop of twine into a small, exact star.net mending begins in the hands before it reaches the eyes. Palms learn the weight of cork floats, each a pale moon with a groove for the line. Fingers learn the steady pull of lead core, gravity made into a cord that keeps ambition from drifting. The shuttle, netting needle, threads a length of twine and becomes a small boat in the stitcher's grip, tacking from knot to knot, over, through, snug. Over, through, snug. The broken diamonds close as if they'd only been yawning. A torn square becomes an equation with one more step, solved by patience rather than cleverness. Winter twine is different from summer's, rougher, more opinionated, eager to drink tar. A pan on a little stove keeps the dressing warm enough to remember it was once resin and tree. A brush persuades it into fibres that, tomorrow, will not freeze to brittleness on the rail. Needles travel the mesh with a tempo that matches the gull bell on the point, steadier than weather, slow as tide. Far along the loft, someone is splicing a head rope, the long, clean lay swallowing its own tail so the eyes won't snag when hauled. The splice sits tidy as truth, Cork lines tell a story as they pass under a rag to wake their grain. Some floats are old, smooth as prayer stones. Some are new and smell faintly of clean bark and sun. A child is set to counting. 1 cork to the fathom, 1 lead to the half. Speak the numbers as you pass them, so the mesh learns its length by ear. The counting is less arithmetic than lullaby for work that must fish steady when the wind makes a sentence out of the sea. The floor holds baskets of fixers waiting their turn, torn bunt from the weir. A seine with a loud rip where last October the fish ran heavy. A gill net that learned the harbour's bottom too well. A knife trims a thread end with the chaste neatness of a clerk's pen. A fid opens a sulky splice and convinces it to remember how to be generous. Nothing is wasted. Odds and ends of cork reborn as markers, scraps of twine braided into lanyards. A coffee tin of lead crimp meant for mending a footrope when the harbour stops being glass outside. A squall strolls by without an argument. The windows whiten and then clear. Boots on the loft stair mutter a wet syllable and are set in a row to steam. Inside, the net's harmonics continue. Over, through, snug. Voices stay low, the way you speak on a night watch. A story is told about the year ice blinks shut across the gut and the whole village walked to the point with lanterns, laughing at the cold the way only people who respect it can. Needles keep time. A spool of twine thinks it might last a spring and then admits it won't, which is fine. The chandler down the lane keeps an honest ledger. Lunch appears without ceremony. Bread that remembers molasses, cheese that remembers grass, chowder the colour of kindness. A cork serves as a rest for a spoon. The needle is parked point down like a wellman at oar. After, mitts go back on and the loft resumes its winter geometry. Diamond, 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 mended square. You can feel the future in the mesh under your hand, a give that stays within its promise. A strength taught in small decisions repeated for yards and yards, near dusk. The repaired net gathers itself in long, careful arms, bite by bite, kiss by kiss of mesh, and settles into a sulky tub like a trained animal that will turn wild again only in water. The head rope lies on top, floats up like a string of pale moons. The leads pull below with the quiet authority of gravity. A chalk mark on the beam becomes a blessing. Ready. A tag reads the boat's name. The room, relieved by one net's completion, feels lighter by several degrees. When the lamps are trimmed, the loft turns amber and sea-like. Gauges hang like ornaments from a nail. A netting needle rests in a mug bearing a nick that everyone knows but no one mentions. Cork dust glows in the lamplight as it falls like gentle snow. Down by the wharf, tarred coils wear their neat hats. Up in the kitchen, brown bread meets butter in its nightly treaty. The nets do not look eager, the sea will teach that, but they look willing, which is what winter asks outside. The harbour's breath evens out. The bell lifts one round note and lets it ride. You run a hand along the last seam and your palm comes away smelling of pitch and pine and a little salt. The door shuts softly behind you. Tomorrow will bring more mending, more counting, more small proofs that spring will have something ready when it knocks. Tonight, the loft keeps its quiet sky of mesh, and the village sleeps under its own net. Streets knotted by habit, houses held by rope and tar and patience. At the mouth of the harbour, the headland keeps a steady eye, even in weather that forgets horizons. The lighthouse stands with its winter shoulders on, paint greyed by salt and blown snow, iron rails slicked to a dull black where hands, year after year, have carried oil and wiped the world away in small circles. On calm days it's only a tall kindness. On days like these it is a verb. To tend, inside, stone stairs turn like a shell. Each landing keeps a little of the keeper's warmth, a coat hung just so, a ledger with its soft arithmetic of lamp oil and wick, a tin that once held biscuits and now keeps wicks proper and dry. Up top the room is all glass and purpose. The lens, prism stacked into patience, holds winter light the way a net holds water, not tightly, just enough to shape and send. The wick is trimmed with a breath held. A whisper of char curls inward and is gone. The flame steadies into the shape you can trust at sea, oil glugs from a can whose pour has been learned, not rushed. Hands do not shake here. The house does enough shaking for everyone when the wind tests the panes. Brass is rubbed until it remembers sun. The keeper moves in a grammar of circles, around the lamp, around the deck, around the day, checking, noting, listening for the small complaint that would mean trouble later. Outside, the sea forgets to be blue and becomes iron. Inside, the lamp remembers to be gold. At the cliff's edge, the bell house keeps company with fog. The bell is not a song so much as a promise paid regularly, a round note that travels through grey to tell boats that shore still has shape. In certain colds the note fattens, as if a mitten had been pulled over the clapper. In certain thaws it thins until it feels like the sound of a finger run around the rim of a glass. Fisherfolk learn these changes the way others learn months. You can say, it's the kind of day the bell wears wool, and everyone nods. Tar has a place even here. The railings that face the worst of it take a winter dressing of pitch, thinned, brushed, soot dark, so rust must argue harder to stay. A coil of line, dressed and black as a gull's eye, hangs by the door for small salvations. The keeper's boots, scrubbed and fed with dubbin that smells faintly of the same pine that feeds the pitch, keep their waterline polite. Tar rides home in the fibres of his coat and sits, with salt, at the edge of the kitchen chair like a signature. Down in the village, the light is a punctuation mark above every chore. A corker lifts his mallet and the lens winks once. A net mender counts corks and the beam sweeps the loft like a slow heartbeat. Children, sent for milk, lift their collars against sleet and walk straighter when the light passes. Noticed, noticed, noticed. On a night when the fog comes and like will pulled over the harbour's head, the keepers ring the bell a thought more often. A man on the wharf pauses, smiles into the grey, and keeps on coiling line. Lenses are winter's good glass. Even on days when dusk means noon, the prisms pull one thin thread of brightness from the cloth and fling it outward in patient revolutions. The keeper wipes the panes with a cloth that has known much salt. The salt gives up its smears and returns to air. A record is made in a hand that never hurries. Wind, direction. Fog, yes. Bell, struck at regulars. Lamp, steady. The book is unexcited on purpose. Drama belongs outside. On clear nights the light counts long distances. Far beyond the point, a trawler rides a shoulder of swell and tips a bow to it, half prayer, half habit. Her wheelhouse is butter yellow for one slow moment, then iron again. The skipper's face lifts in that small, involuntary nod people give to useful things. In the village, a window catches the flash and sharpens its lamp, as if lamps like to agree with each other. The bell sleeps. The tide turns under a skin of stars. Storm nights call everybody to their best manners. The keeper trims again, checks again, wins the clockwork that turns the concentric night into equal parts. Ice feathers along one pane. A hand warms it and the feather becomes water and then becomes gone. The bell's line is checked for chafe. The striker's pin is greased with a swipe from a rag that smells of tar and iron. Down below, a second person listens in the stairwell where the tower hums in wind, stone singing a low note like a ship's hull. They do not speak. The work is the speaking. At dawn, fog thins like a thought you meant to keep. The room fills with a grey that is almost light. The wick, trimmed for the last time of the watch, burns small and correct until the day earns its own brightness. The beam still walks out over a sea that remembers, then, with a small hesitation, goes to sleep. The bell falls back to the slow, ritual intervals the morning can bear. The keeper writes, lamp out. Bell too ordinary. Visibility improving. Ice, nil. The word nil looks cheerful. Back in the cove, tar kettles remember themselves, nets breathe on their hooks, chowder repeats its warm argument. The light, off now, still seems present, like warmth after you've left the bath. People work differently for a while, as if they'd been looked after and had decided to return the favour to their own hinges and seams. When night climbs the hill again, the tower will relight without making an announcement. It never makes one. It just keeps and keeps and keeps. The gear room smells like decisions that were made to last. Canvas and linseed, tar and salt, wet wool steaming itself back toward usefulness. Hooks along the wall carry the winter's vocabulary. Oilskins the colour of old gold, sou'wester hats with their kind brims, sea boots that remember the exact height a wave can surprise. The air is warm near the little stove and honest everywhere else. Light from a single window falls in a rectangle that seems to polish whatever it touches. Oilskins begin as canvas that learn patience. In summer, bolts were cut at the table, edges turned and stitched in a straight, faithful line. In autumn, the cloth drank a mixture the room still whispers about: boiled linseed oil with just enough turpentine to make it walk into fibres, a hint of ochre or chrome to turn weather into colour. Hung from rafters, the coats and trousers cured for weeks while flies made slow halos in the barn light. Now, in winter, the fabric moves like wood taught to be cloth, not stiff, not limp, decided. A sleeve creaks, a kindly sound, when a wrist asks for more room around a knot. Sou'westers line a shelf like folded birds, not fancy, but correct. Their long tails promise to keep rain from marching down a neck. Their fronts promise not to argue with wind. Some are painted canvas, some tarred and burnished by years. The inside crown keeps a memory of salt and hair oil, a proof that bodies, like boats, leave their signatures. A child tries one on and disappears to the eyebrows. The room laughs the way rooms do when they mean it. Wool has the heavier music. Guernseys and ganzas, sweaters knit tight as a good splice, hang by the fire, patterns marching like small tides across the belly. Ladders, ropes, diamonds, a geography made by needles. They dry into warmth, not just dryness, and carry the smell of lanolin the way a net carries the smell of tar, honestly, and with purpose. Mittens lie open like shells. Some have a second layer stitched into the palm, cut from an old coat that knew 1,000 coils of line. The stitch marks look like winter stars dot on the bench, a tin of Dubbin waits beside a brush whose bristles shine black at the tips. Boots receive their ration, rubbed until the leather darkens to a quiet, oiled glow that knows how to reject sea without rejecting feet. A horn spoon lives in the tin, scooped and scraped so many times that it resembles a small crescent moon. Lace is thick as pencil lead are checked. Eyes are cleared of salt. The rhythm of maintenance settles the mind. Winter's thrift feels like affection in this light. Canvas has its appointments. A slicker's seam gets a new bead of wax. A torn cuff receives a patch, stitched with sailmaker's palm and needle, the needle's eye black with a smear of tarred twine. On the table, a length of marlin spools out with polite authority. It will whip rope ends, seize shy shackles, and tie down lids that prefer to talk in weather. A square of painted canvas becomes a bait bag tomorrow after it spends the night forgetting the folds it learned in storage. Boys are winter bright in the dim room. Their paint stubbornly cheerful, red that knows snow, white that stays white, black that looks wet even when dry. Each is lettered with a name that can be read in a hurry, because hurry is when names matter. A brush with a single hair out of place adds a neat numeral, nothing vain about it, information that will be grateful to exist in fog. On the floor, a coil of line already dressed in tar waits to learn which boy will be its friend. Hands move without show. A toggle is replaced on a coat, shaped from a bit of oak that fell out of a pot rack last week. A knife is stoned until it thinks a clean thought. A clasp is persuaded with a drop of oil to behave when cold makes everyone stubborn. A small lantern is opened, wick trimmed with the same respect the lightkeeper uses, then shut again until it's asked to be brave on a bad night. Tools make their domestic sounds, click, chappy, tap, and the room's shoulders relax outside. The harbour lays a slow hand on the wharf posts. Ice feathers the inside edge of the cove. The bell on the point measures the weather in patient rounds. In here, time doesn't exactly stop. It arranges itself. A kettle argues softly with itself on the stove. A mug receives a pour and sits fuming politely. A slice of brown bread is buttered for no grand reason. News arrives folded in a pocket. Tomorrow may bring wind, and is accepted with nods that mean, we had planned to be ready anyway before closing. The room orders itself the way a deck is ordered, coats in a line. Hats nested, boots paired toe to heel, wool hung by weight. A list is penciled on the door jamb where lists have lived for years. Mend cuff, more twine, ask Tom about paint, tar pot Thursday. The pencil stubs out with a blunt, satisfying stop. Someone flips a coat hem once, and the fabric answers with a good, rain-sounding rustle, As if rehearsing, when the lamp is turned low, the gear room keeps its shapes with confidence. The door clicks into weather. The latch remembers its seat. Outside, the light on the headland counts distances for anyone listening. Inside, oilskins keep their quiet guard. Sleeves hang like patient arms. Boots dream of grip. Wool holds warmth in advance. Winter goes on polishing its glass. The harbour breathes. And the room, tar sweet at the edge and lanolin deep in the middle, waits to hand the day back its courage in the morning. At the back of the lane where sled runners draw two quiet lines, a low shed keeps summer folded into winter. The pot shed smells of spruce lath, tar, brine, and old bait. Nothing rude, just the honest memory of work put away carefully. Snow leans against the clapboards. Inside, a stove hums a small, persuasive note. Along the wall, traps line up like patient animals, some round, some square, some half-mooned, wooden ribs showing through a skin of twine that will be renewed before the first fair weather thinks to knock. Hoops are the pot's bones. Steam rises from a trough where oak and ash hoops take their warm lesson. Bent over a form, they learn their curve without complaint. A strap cinches, a wedge persuades, and the circle remembers it was once a straight line that changed its mind. Spruce lath, narrow, pale, runs fore and aft and athwart, turned with a pocket plane until the edges lose splinters and keep only usefulness. Nails answer with soft, winter voices, tick, 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 never in a hurry, always in agreement. Heads and throats are netted on a lap board with a shuttle that has known decades of knots. Twine moves in a winter tempo, over, through, snug, until a cone appears that will admit what hunger and curiosity bring and discourage second thoughts. The parlour, quiet word for the trap's last room, gets its own neat mesh, tighter and truer, a geometry that is more patient than clever. A boy is set to splicing bridles. His palm guard squeaks gently and the marlin minding its lay looks pleased. Not too proud, someone says, which is both a lesson in splices and in living. Tar is a winter colour in here. The pot's bridles wear it. The warp rope, long as a winter day, drinks it. The toggles and thimbles accept a coat that turns weather aside without making a show of it. A kettle by the door holds the pitch just shy of a simmer. Brushes stand like reeds in a jar, black-tipped and faithful. The brush passes over knot and leaves it with a small halo, strength made visible. Boys, turned in a brother's shop last autumn, wait in a row for fresh paint bright enough to be found in fog. Red, white, black. A neat numeral. A stripe that says this one is ours. Bait barrels keep a different ledger. Brine winks under a thin rime. A lid, stave from a pickle cask, shifts and settles with a small, briny sigh. Someone hauls a tub onto trestles and re-rivets a loose band. Tap, 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 the sound of future mornings becoming possible. The floor holds a geography of salt. Here a pale dune kicked from a boot. There a thin glitter where a spill forgot to be wiped. None of it feels untidy. It feels like a map of continuities. Knots are winter's handwriting. Warps are coiled and seized. Eyes are spliced where they will later greet a cleat without sulking. A length is measured by arm spans and marked with a smear of tar you can read by glove. Cork toggles are bored and strung. Wooden toggles are rubbed with oil until they think like seals in rain. The shed speaks softly in many dialects. Wood, twine, iron, pitch. Every sound translates to spring outside. The cove crusts at the edges and breathes in the middle. The bell on the point wears will in its voice today. Inside, the stove gives a small pop. A kettle resigns itself to being tea soon. The air tastes of resin and old summers. A woman paints the day's last boy, steady hand, neat tail on the numeral. A child counts with a mitten off, 12 done. 13 to go, then puts the mitten back as if the number could keep his fingers warm. Lunch arrives in a pail that once held nails. Chowder closes around its own steam when the lid is lifted. Brown bread produces the exact number of slices needed without debate. A boy makes a good spoon rest. A hoop makes a good seat. Talk accepts the stove's rhythm. A storm mentioned, a window in the wind predicted. A memory of the winter the parlour mesh went soft and fish learned to back out like gentlemen. Laughter sits low and honest, work resumes with a kind delight. A pot that rocked on the floorboards loses its wobble when a cedar shim accepts a new home under a foot. A bridled warp receives a final touch, whipping tight and clean, then coils on a sled ready to meet paint and numbers. The shed door opens. The smell of the harbour lifts a corner of the room and tucks it back again. Snow confettis the sill and is brushed away by a sleeve that already knew it would be there near dusk. A line of traps stands finished, throats netted neat. Bridles snug, warps dressed, boys paired like punctuation, ready to make sense of a spring sea. A pencil notes on a door jamb that has held notes for years. 6 pots rebuilt. 2 hoops bent. Bait tub riveted. Tom W. Paint warps. The graphite looks hopeful. Lanterns answer with a warm yes. When the lamps go low, the shed keeps its shape with certainty. Hoops sleep in their forms. Brushes lean like reeds against a black pond. Boys dry into their cheerful winter stars. Outside, the light on the headland counts distance. Inside, the pots seem to breathe, with settling toward stillness. You close the door and the latch finds its old idea of home. Snow keeps writing polite edits along the thresholds. The sea listens, unhurried, and agrees that readiness is a kind of rest. The cove wears winter like glass that remembers being water. At first light, a skim lies so thin you can hear gulls in it, a faint, brittle chatter as their feet argue with the science of weight. By noon, the inside edge has thickened to a pewter you can measure with a boot heel, while the channel out by the bell stays dark and honest, moving as if nothing above it had changed. Harbour ice, like a good neighbour, minds boundaries. It settles where wharf posts keep watch and leaves the mouth for boats and tide along the inshore floats. A frost fringe grows, needles pointing outward, a porcupine of cold. Ropes rise stiff, tar shining like seal coat on a moonless road. A hand runs along a coil and comes away scented of pitch and January. The line bends slower than summer, but it bends, which is all winter asks. Cleats wear white knuckles. Ladder rungs bloom with hoarfrost that looks like feathered salt, then vanishes under the first steady palm. The day makes small rehearsals of spring. Freeze, soften, behave. Children are given the inside ice and the rules. Where the tide leaves a black seam, you bow to it and go around. Where wharf shadows cut the sheet in squares, you count them and choose the brightest. Where a skiff has been slid out and back for days, you call that fairway a story and only read the margins. Skates scratch a thin calligraphy, loops, shy arabesques, sudden stops, letters you could almost send if the post took ice as postage. A boy's mitten tests a tide crack. The water answers with a delicate vowel, not quite a warning, more a reminder that the sea is thinking under every footstep. Men use the ice differently. A skiff is ferried across a narrow bridge of crust to a boat that rides the dark stripe like a winter trout. The hull's shoulder nudges slush into fringe. An oar's square blade, turned vertical, serves as an ice hook. A push here, a pry there, a sure-footed step, and a job that needed doing finds itself already on the ledger's right-hand page. Coal comes down the lane by sled. At the ramp, a sled runner meets bare plank and sighs like a relieved hinge. Tarred warps, coiled at the ready, wait for the one noon when wind, tide, and intention will all say yes. Midday learns to listen. Ice speaks in courteous cracks, not the panic scream of lakes, but a civilized settling. Tick, tack, tuck, each sound a stitch that holds and then loosens and then holds again. Post and pile add their wooden baseline, a slow complaint that means nothing is wrong. The bell out at the point puts wool on its voice and keeps schedule. You can hear its round note travelling under the skin, as if sound had decided it preferred water to air in winter. On the wharf, a seam of salt left from last week's storm throws confetti when boots scuff it. The sun bites down to a wet thought that freezes again by 3. Nets hang in their high rafters like dark laundry, picking up ice dust on the low loops and shedding it when the loft door opens. A pan of pitch left too near the shed wall stiffens and is rescued with a kiss of flame. It remembers itself and loosens into syrup with a grateful gloss. Someone laughs quietly, the winter joke of saving the savour. Kitchens mark the ice by hunger. Chowder more generous with potatoes on days when the channel says no. Salt cod croquettes appear when the bell sounds thick. Brown bread slices thickened by a thumb on evenings when the weather can't decide. From the schoolhouse, a line of skates clatters home, strips of leather slapping like small flags. From the rope walk, a sled goes past with coils as dark as gull eyes, bound in twine that knows how to suffer cold without sulking. The village moves along its glassy edges in a choreography as old as its pilings. Toward dusk, the sheet turns mirror and then turns page. The sky writes pink into grey, and the ice copies it with schoolchild care. A skiff noses home, each stroke a soft knuckle on the season's door. The tide lifts under everything. You can't see it, but the posts tell you, rising out of their own shadows like thoughtful giants. Where the skin meets the channel, a lace breaks and remakes itself with every breath. Lanterns appear in windows. A child's face floats briefly over a rhymed pane like a moon in a low cloud. After dark, the cove edits. The brightest cracks darken and sleep. New lines write themselves so faint you can only hear them. The bell counts between snowflakes. On a night with stars, the ice keeps them, pinpricked and unmoving, until a skater's morning blade will set them free into ripples. On a night with weather, snow lays a soft grammar over everything, making footsteps polite and mistakes forgettable. Boats groan and approve. Ropes thaw a fraction in their own tar. The harbour breathes what it has always breathed, salt and patience, and winter answers with a nod only the water can feel. By morning, the rules have changed by a finger's width. Someone cracks a ladle of water from the bait tub's newborn lid. Someone taps the ramp with a boot and listens. Someone writes on the door jamb, ice to in afloat, channel open, which is as much poetry as a working place needs. The cove will unmake its glass soon enough, but for now it holds the village in a shallow, shining bowl. You step onto the safe part, pass along the wharf boards that remember every winter, and the sound your boots make is the same sound as the nets mending above, steady, careful, cheerful when no one is looking. Weather walks up the coast like a rumour that knows your door. The barometer lowers its polite eye. The radio gives a forecast in numbers that feel like the bones of wind. The bell on the point puts wool on its note and keeps time anyway. In the harbour, boats lean in their slips as if to whisper counsel. Lines doubled, chafing gear set where rope meets iron, canvas snugged with the exact seriousness winter deserves. The smell outside sharpens to iron and salt. Inside, rooms practice the art of waiting without waste, charts open on a table polished by elbows. Fingers travel the familiar coasts, headlands and shoals, bell buoys that have rung in rain you can still taste. Pencil ticks mark soundings you could run in your sleep, and did, when September was big with fish and October kept its promises. Today the marks are a comfort, not a plan. A tide book lies open to pages that look like patient cardiograms. High, low, slack, high. You read them the way you read an elder's face. Every line means history and caution at the same time. Outside, tar works quietly. Breast lines, dressed in pitch weeks ago, face the gusts with a calm sheen. Spring lines wear their whippings like good manners and give just enough. The slick black on a rail you brushed on Tuesday has already turned the mornings wet into beads that run the right way. A coil, tugged once, shifts almost silently, the fibres oiled into obedience. Tar does not stop a storm. It makes things keep their character while the storm forgets its own. The nor'easter arrives with a slow fist. First, rain that remembers sleet. Then sleet that considers snow. Then snow that commits to riding the village new. Armada shutters take their evening positions at noon. Lamps learn to be suns. The school lets out early. Skates clatter home like thin hooves on wooden streets. At the wharf, a pair of figures bends to check cleats, a hand around cold iron, a nod, a rope's small approving groan. The harbour surface turns a darker thought than water, panelled with wind. The channel outside the bell whitens and vanishes, reappears, vanishes again, sound rearranges itself. Gusts moan in keyholes, a low reed instrument. The bell thickens, then thins, then thickens, as if wrapped and unwrapped by the same mitten hand. Tar kettle and chowder pot share a stove in the shed, pitch kept shy of smoke on one side, lunch kept shy of boil on the other. Tools speak low, mallet once, marlinspike once, lid once. The rope walk slides its doors nearly shut and hums a slow, wooden vowel. The light on the headland walks without brag. Prisms turn grey into a line you can use. Meanwhile, kitchens run the harbour in miniature. A ledger page on the icebox. Candles, enough. Coal, enough. Milk, tomorrow's sled. Bread, rise now. Oilskins drip by the stove, forming small, dark lakes that evaporate into the stew's breath. Wool thickens the air with lanolin, honest as a handshake. A mitten string is mended with tarred twine because kindness lasts longer when it knows about weather. Children watch from windows sealed by circles of breath. Their quiet suddenly practiced, as if storms grade for conduct dot on the floats. A skiff keeps a finger width of freeboard under snow, as if demonstrating the concept of barely and correctly. Someone steps aboard. Scoops with a coffee can until the rail remembers sky, says nothing. Ties a second stopper not out of habit, and goes. A gull rides a lift of air over the gut and disappears into wool. Posts wear hoods. Cleats grow white knuckles and then release them and then grow them again. The nor'easter moves like a sentence with many commas and one patient period you can't see yet. The day shrinks to the size of the lamp. Supper is simple, steaming, persuasive. The radio's voice loses a county and gains a wave. Fork speaks softly on plates. A kettle rehearses the same argument forever and is forgiven because it is kind. Between gusts, a different stillness arrives, the kind that lets you hear your own house breathe, the roof's low punctuation, the window finding its seat, the stove's iron shrug. A coat hangs by the door and drips a tar-dark tear onto the mat. Even the droplet looks prepared. Night lifts the storm into its proper key. The bell keeps schedule for anyone out there with work they could not put off. The light counts distances for people who have none left to spare. In the loft, nets sway a fraction on their hooks, as if remembering water. In the pot shed, boys stand bright and confident in the lamplight. The numerals need enough to be bravery. On the ways, a boat settles in her cradle and lets the wind speak past her ribs. The harbour does not sleep, exactly. It keeps .by dawn. The fist unclenches. The barometer steps up 2 polite notches. The bell's voice loses its wool. Snow changes from intention to consequence. People tidy thresholds. The shovel's grammar careful and small, then walk down to see what the harbour has to say. Ropes, behaved. Cleats, obliging. A plank, gone loose and found. A buoy, tipped and righted. A note, thank you, Tom, written with a mitten on a frosted window for the one who checked lines in the bad hour. The village collects itself the way a net does, loop by loop, each a small promise that holds. You stand on the wharf with coffee in your mitten and the wind finally answering questions instead of asking them. The tar sheen on a breastline looks almost like pride. The light on the headland goes about its ordinary business, which is to say its heroic business, without comment. Gulls read the edges for news and find enough to make a morning of it. You make a mark on the door jamb, nor'easter, lines good, 1 plank, because storms, like winters, are better as records than as forecasts. The harbour breathes. So do you. The shop stands just above the tide's reach, a long, low room where it learns to behave like water. Outside, the cove wears its grey winter. Inside, the air is amber with sawdust and lamp. Planes sleep bristle up on the bench. An adze leans like a serious cane. A row of chisels keeps its bright opinions in a rack along the wall. The stove ticks approval and a kettle thinks quietly. It smells like pine and oak and a little tar that wandered in on someone's cuff and decided to stay. Shavings make winter into a soft weather of their own. The first pull of a jack plane lifts a ribbon that curls warm from the board's back, a language you can read with your palm. Pine sings a clear, sweet note. Oak answers lower and patient. Scarfs are marked in pencil, long, courteous meetings of grain to grain. Then sawn true, pared truer, dry fit until the seam stops asking and starts agreeing. A trunnel hole is bored. The auger spiral grows a pale corkscrew that falls to the floor like a friendly icicle and is kicked aside by boots that know not to grind. Steam is winter's kindness to wood. A box along the wall exhales in small sighs. A cedar rib disappears into the heat and returns pliant, its stubbornness softened into memory. Two people carry it to the molds with gloved hands. The rib bends. The rib yields. The rib becomes the curve it was always hinting at. A wedge persuades, a clamp listens, a mallet says yes like a low drum. In a cold world, becoming a curve feels like proof that time favors those who warm others first. Corking battens get new thought where ice made old seems too honest. A strake is sprung and renewed, its back beveled to accept winter's argument without letting it in. The adze, lifted and guided short, bites and smooths, until the surface is a sentence with no stray words. The shop's floor keeps a geography of days, pale drifts of plain ribbon by the bench, heavier chips where the adze chose, black freckles of tar near the stove, a combed path to the door where someone brushed snow from their coat and decided not to say why they were smiling. Copper rivets live in a tobacco tin, little suns under a film of green. A plank asks for them. The point goes, burr waits, a rove is set, and then the calm, slow pain, tick, 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 marries wood and metal without bruising either. The seam closes a fraction, then a hair, then it is done. A quiet permanence you can feel with your fingernail and hear with your ear if you put your head near the hull and listen for confidence. Along the keel. A scarf receives its last whisper of fit and someone's breath fogs the wood and disappears as if agreement itself had a temperature. Patterns hang from rafters like winter kites, a stem traced in full size. A transom that once taught a boy the difference between angle and guess. A knee with its grain drawn like muscles. They are history you can reuse. A compass scribe scratches its little half-moons. A batten lays a fair line and the eye nods. Fairness is a feeling before it's a measure. The shop knows which boards will become frames and which will become shelves for pickles, and both feel like shipwright work. Lunch comes in a pail that used to be paint and now keeps chowder proper. Spoons clink. A line is sharpened while a story is told about a winter when the steam box froze its latch and had to be talked into opening with kind words and a kettle. The laughter stays behind the teeth. Tools prefer that level. Someone oils a sole plate with a thumb's coin of wax. The plane will remember and glide like skate on good ice. Afternoon narrows to detail. A molding plane returns a bead that will make a sheer strake look the way the hand already thought it should. A rabbit is pared whisper thin where it meets the stem so the hood end will sit without wondering. A scarf is bedded in white lead that smells faintly of the old grammar of boats. Long before numbers, there were thicknesses and a sense that fit is a kind of truth you arrive at by listening. Outside, the light goes pewter and then a warmer pewter. Inside, the shop holds steady noon for one more hour, the stove measuring time in soft expansions. Near dusk, the day's arithmetic is swept into piles, curls of pine that look like small seas, oak chips that feel like dry thunder, a few copper trimmings that wink back at lamp. The rib cools happily in its clamps, a curve made, a future promised. A scarf sits tight and unremarkable, which is its highest aim. The kettle empties with one last exhale and says nothing further. Tools go home, edge stoned, beards wiped, iron let down. The mallet lies on its side like a sleeping seal. You step out and the harbour breathes its cold, briny syllable. The shop's door closes with a note you know. Down on the floats, the boats accept the evening as if it had been explained to them personally. Up on the hill, a window carries the same lamplight as the lens on the point, different scales of the same promise. Inside the shop the steam box forgets to hiss. The clamps loosen in their sleep. The shavings remember warmth until morning. Winter, pleased, pulls its coat tighter and lets the work rest. Winter light needs help, and the village keeps a room for that. The chandlery smells of beeswax and tallow, of lamp oil with a clean, sea-bitter edge, of rope ends that learn to behave with a lick of tar. Shelves hold wicks braided like quiet thoughts. Tins of polish remember brass before storms fog it. Small glass chimneys, washed and set in rows, wait to make flames into manners. The doorbell lifts a single, civil note. The stove approves with a low, punctual tick. Wick cutting is winter precise. Hands measure by habit. 2 fingers pass the trimmer's guide, then square the end clean so the flame will mind its letters and not gutter into smoke. Cotton braid drinks oil and remembers how to feed a steady yellow without whispering black at the glass. A lamp is dressed, reservoir filled to the line, threads wiped, chimney seated with a careful twist. When lit, the flame rises to thoughtful, not excited, and the room learns to see the day again. Even while the window forgets it early beside the lamp bench. Blocks of beeswax keep the smell of summer in reserve. A kettle softens a batch that will become dipping sticks by nightfall. Small candles for gear rooms and loft stairs, light enough to carry, honest enough to last. A child counts in pairs. 1, 2. 1, 2. Dutiful as the bell at the point. In a jar near the till, a tangle of match splints parasols outward from yesterday's work, pine-scented and ready to tell a wick hello. The ledger reads like household poetry. Oil, 2 quarts. Wicks, 6. Chimney, 1 spare. Polish, a tin for Aunt May's brass. Across the lane, the cooper's shop keeps a winter weather of shavings and steam. Staves lean in bundles like tall, patient reeds, oak for strength, ash for easy bend. A steam chest breathes in small satisfied sighs. Staves come out warm, edges playing true to meet each other like old neighbours who recall every story and bear no grudges. The raising of a cask is a circle taught to stand, bottom chocked, first staves coaxed into a ring, temporary hoop tapped down with a mallet that speaks a kindly, wooden syllable. The cask learns balance. The cooper listens with his palm, measurements here are sound and feel. The sun plane kisses an edge. The crow's carves its inner groove for the head to nestle. A chamfer whispers away at the chine. Hoops, truss, quarter, and bilge tighten in a progression that would look like music if you could see it, iron singing a little as it settles. Rivets blink. A stave that argued a week ago now agrees as if it invented the idea. The head goes in with a nod of persuasion, a mallet's breath, and then a hush. The barrel has decided to hold. What will it hold? Winter's answers are many. Salt for cod, brine for bait, molasses for bread, oil for lamps, nails for shipwrights, pickles for courage. Each cask earns its marking iron, a letter seared true, a number that means a promise can be found again even in fog. Tar brushes the chime for a weatherproofing as polite as a collar. Hoops get a thin kiss of oil so they won't sulk at the first freeze. A bung is turned from cedar, fitted with a twist that feels inevitable. The cask rolls on its bilge with a good-natured ah-ah and stops where a gloved hand thought it should. Lunch is pale plain and warming, chowder that finds everyone's hands. Brown bread sliced to the exact fairness of appetite, a wedge of cheese that remembers grass. A stave offcut becomes a spoon rest. The crow sits nicely out of reach where it can't tempt a pocket. Stories travel in low winter voices. The barrel that went to sea and came back smelling of cloves. The lamp that kept burning when the gale forgot to. The time a hoop sprang like a fish and taught a man to keep his ear out of harm's way. The shop chuckles politely and returns to work. Afternoon narrows to neatness. A head is chased with a final plane so water will glance and go elsewhere. A cask for oil receives its inner rinse and a sniff that says clean is a flavour. At the chandlery, chimneys are wiped with vinegar that turns smoke to memory. Polished brass becomes a small sun before it ever meets flame. Someone rubs a length of tarred marlin between finger and thumb until it remembers to lie flat and quiet. Tomorrow it will lash a bung tight against a night-crossing slop toward dusk. Light and container shake hands. Lamps are tried. Wicks trimmed once. Glass checked for a spotless night. Casks are bunged, hooped, leaded, rolled to their corners like sleeping seals. One barrel is tapped and sings a note that sounds like February choosing to be kind. The chandlery door bell speaks its last soft punctuation. The ledger draws a line. The day closes its eyelids without drama outside. The headland's beam walks the harbour. The bell hums its round truth. House windows repeat smaller versions of the same lesson. A steady oval of light where supper is. In the gear room, a candle burns without asking the lamp to do everything. In the net loft, a lantern hangs a little lower to warm someone's hands while they count. Down at the wharf, a new cask waits to be a seat, a table, a step. Winter is made of these aids. Light you can trust, containers that keep promises. Smells that say summer once happened and will again when night settles. Rooms keep their temper because wicks were trimmed and oil was good. Kitchens remember sweetness because barrels behaved. Work can stop exactly where it should because things meant to hold are holding. You blow out a lamp. The chimney fogs, then clears. Darkness becomes a friend who steps closer without malice. In bed, the house keeps breathing. The casks settle their hoops with tiny ticks like rain beginning. And out at the point, the lens keeps its revolving arithmetic while a small brass burner turns oil into distance, one wick length at a time. Up 2 flights above tar and tide, the sail loft is winters wide, bright quiet. Floorboards run like a frozen river. Long tables hold a geography of canvas, cream turning to amber where old sun once paused. Windows scuffed by salt lay pale. Rectangles on a cloth, and the room smells of flax, beeswax, chalk, and the faint, sea-sweet ghost of last season's wind. Outside, gulls write grey commas over the gut. Inside, time becomes stitch links and measured hands. Canvas speaks first in chalk. A sailmaker's square walks the cloth, right angles made friendly by use. A batten draws a fair curve for leech and foot. Notches whisper where reef bands will live. Hands test the cloth's temper along the bias. Give here, stay there, so the sail will keep its manners when a nor'easter asks hard questions. Panels meet like well-raised neighbours. Selvage to marking, grain agreeing, pins like tiny lighthouses set along the seam. Stitching is winter's meter. Palms strapped on, leather worn to a soft shine, push needles through double layers, the thump as satisfying as a knock on a friendly door. Twine, waxed to a quiet gold, runs from cake to cloth, leaving a thin, obedient sheen. Flat seams lie down under the iron's warm persuasion. Lap seams take their 2 rows neat as fence lines in snow. A grommet is hand-sewn into the cloth's round memory, eyelet roped with stitches that stack like tiny, proud coins. Reef points. Arrive in pairs. Each is a promise that the sail can become small and stay brave. Bolt rope makes a border the way winter hedges fields. 3-strand, tar sweet. It is laid along the luff and foot, married to canvas with a spiral that reads as one line from a distance. At the clue, a thimble seats in a nest of seizings, marlin. Dark and well-behaved, then is served until weather will have to speak politely to be heard. The head kringle receives its stout circle and looks suddenly like the point where load will become song. Patches tell old stories and prevent new ones. A chafe scar from last July becomes an honest diamond of cloth stitched so truly it looks inevitable. A sun-softened corner gets a second chance, layered and bound, the stitches stepping around like small, careful boots. Numbers are brushed on in lampblack, plain, legible, no flourishes, so a sail can be found in a fog of gear and weather. A boat's name in the corner reminds everyone what all this patience is for. A hull that trusts its wings, voices in the loft keep to the register of wool. A kettle hums on a ring-stained plate. Mugs sit near but not on the canvas. Crumbs behave. At the edge of a paper that lists today's lengths, reef bands, 2, bolt rope, 18 fathoms, grommets, 27. Someone tells how a winter gust once shouldered the eave and sent a snow veil across the tables, and how the whole room laughed softly and kept stitching until the veil forgot itself. The needles nodded midday, the iron trades hands, chalk is. Refreshed, a palm is retired with a tug that feels like friendship. A boy learns to backstitch without puckering. A girl learns to taper a seam so a gust won't find a snag and turn it into a quarrel. Beeswax blocks loose small mountains to twine. The floor keeps tidy drifts of thread like frost that can be swept with one kind pass. Outside, the bell thickens and thins with weather. Inside, stitch and thump and pull and snug make their low, faithful music. Late light turns the cloth to honey. Finished panels are married into a single plane that looks, for a moment, like a winter field. The sail is flaked longways, arm's-length bites that lie obedient, breath held. A bundle of sail stops waits like punctuation for morning. The corner rings wink once. The bolt rope line looks pleased with its slow spiral. Someone writes on. The jam where the day keeps its record. Mainsail, seams dressed, bolt rope laid, reef band done, jib, cut, tomorrow stitch. The pencil stub makes a soft, correct period. When the lamps go low, the loft holds its bright quiet without trying. Palms hang by their straps. The iron cools with 3 small clicks. The chalk line sleeps on the table like pale tide. Down. On the wharf, tarred coils grow a rim of frost. Up at the point, the lens turns its patient arithmetic. The sail waits warm under itself, winter made to meet spring wind without argument. You close the stair door, the latch finds its seat. The room keeps the sound of needles after you leave, the way a shell keeps sea. Nights lengthen kindly in winter, and the village learns to tie them into something that holds. A table in the gear room becomes a small spool of rope, short lengths cut from ends too good to throw away, a marlin spike with its clean steel beak, a fid smooth as a well-handled stone. The room smells of dubbin and pitch and wool that has remembered the body. A lamp throws an oval on the boards. Within it, the day's noises turn to soft words. Knots are a language you speak with your hands. A reef knot lies honest and flat, the way a lid lies on a jar when you mean it. A bowline becomes a steady eye out of a loose thought. The rabbit comes up the hole, around the tree, and back down, and the loop is home. A clove hitch sits quiet on a post like a polite guest. The rolling hitch remembers how to persuade a line that is already working, and does it without an argument. A fisherman's bend, 2 turns, 2 tucks, keeps a hook honest when the sea tells its louder stories, serving and whipping a winter's punctuation. Whippings bite the end of a rope and ask it to behave. Seizing marries a shackle to a warp with neat, black grammar. A tar pot the size of a teacup lives on a trivet by the stove. Marlin runs through it and emerges dark and well-tempered, the way good advice comes back after heat. Fingers learn not to count, exactly, but to repeat until the line feels complete. 6 turns here, for there. A hidden knot that will not come loose even when cold asks impolite questions. Stories are told at the speed of splices. No one opens with the biggest wave they ever met. They open with the smallest lesson that never forgot its use. A grandparent shows a short splice that won't complain under a pull and a long splice that will pass a block without thinking. Someone tells how a sheep bend saved a night when rope ran out and 2 lines had to agree to be one. Another tells about the winter a boy name was painted crooked and how every fish that year tried to teach humility. Coffee nods in tin cups. Laughter stays behind teeth so the lamp glass won't fog. Children coil rope the way winter asks you to walk. Patient, regular, with your attention in your hands. They learn to flake a line so it will pay out like thought instead of like surprise. A mitten is pulled off for the last tuck of a crown knot. Someone warms the freed hand with their own without noticing. A sailor's bracelet grows out of scrap twine, round and stubborn, then slides onto a wrist with the satisfied squeak of a new habit found. Outside, the headland light keeps its round grammar over the gut. Inside, an almanac on the side table offers tides and moon with the confidence of a clock that can see the sea. A pencil marks next week's springs and neaps, a private underline. Here is patience, here is caution. The bell on the point adds its low punctuation and the rope on the table seems to listen. A length of harbour become hand-sized. There is a watch even when no one calls it that. A coat sits ready by the door. A hat hangs with its brim still wet from a step outside that counted cleats by habit. Notes ride the door jamb where winter keeps its little truths. Pot shed, warp served. Rope walk, splice twine low. Wharf, breast line good. Someone ties a stopper not in a thought that was wandering and the room agrees to let the night pass safely. When the lamp is turned down, the knots keep their shape in the dark. A bowline lies like a calm eye on the table. A coil rests with its tail tucked so it won't undo itself when no one's looking. Marlin cools and keeps its pitch the way the stove keeps a red idea under ash. You step outside and the harbour answers with salt and a little iron. The light turns. The bell declares distance. Your gloves remember the last knot they learned. Sleep comes like a well-dressed line, paid out without tangles, ready for the first clean pull of morning. Sunday lowers the village to a softer gear, as if someone eased the throttle and let the tide decide the tempo. The bell in the white church up the hill keeps a round, unhurried count. Gulls answer in commas and then remember to be polite. Tar kettles cool with their lids on. The rope walk door stays latched. Mallets and adzes rest like animals that have earned a day off. Even the cove seems to breathe more gently, a darker, slower colour of water folding around the pilings. Clothes know it's Sunday first. Oilskins wait on their pegs. Wool comes forward, brushed, mended, smelling faintly of cedar and salt. A ganza turned good side outward wears its patterns like quiet announcements. Ropes, ladders, diamonds, all the weather held in stitches. Boots get a rag and a thumb of dubbin, not for weather but for respect. Children practice standing still in wool socks while a grown hand flattens a cowlick with water that remembers the pump. The walk to meeting is a short voyage through known lanes. Wharves are nodded to like fellow parishioners, lines taut but rested, cleats wearing polite hats of frost, a skiff tipping one slow bow to the harbour. The church door opens on lamp-warm air and the smell of hymnals and wood rubbed smooth by a century of sleeves. Voices begin without strain, low, steady, braided, and the songs carry the shape of the sea even when they mention hills. Hands that yesterday held tar brushes turn pages. A boy watches the bell rope and imagines the fog bell at the point making friends with it. Sermon words drift like weather observations. Measure what you have. Keep what you've promised. Mend what's torn before it tears worse. Be grateful for work, and for the hours that tell it to wait. A cough in the back agrees. A baby sighs like a little tide. Outside the frosted panes, the headland light sits idle in day but looks ready, as a good tool should. The benediction lands soft as snow. Go in peace. The harbour will still be there when you return. Home takes the quiet and turns it into dinner. Chowder hums at a lower simmer. Brown bread submits to a generous slice of butter as if auditioning for comfort. Pickles appear in a small dish because brightness doesn't disappear on Sunday. It simply lowers its voice. A letter is started at the table. Dear Will, weather holding, ice to in afloat, rope served, ink making little harbours of its own in the curves of words. The stub of a pencil adds a sketch of the cove. A tiny boy painted in the margin like a wink. Afternoon is for unhurried mending that doesn't smell of pitch. A cuff receives 3 good stitches. A mitten learns its thumb again. A patch goes on a knee with a thread that matches almost perfectly and therefore pleases the eye. A boy practices a bowline without the kettle nearby, knots making sense even with clean hands. A girl reads aloud from an almanac and the room nods to a week of neeps and springs. Here's patience. Here's caution. The stove ticks once, agreeing, down by the wharf, cats patrol with the dignity of small, experienced harbour masters. They sit on sun-warmed planks, tails wrapped like tidy rope ends, and study gulls who study them back. A skater tests the very inside ice with the respect due to something that can change its mind. A man leans on a post and listens to the cove's Sunday grammar. Less clatter, more vowels. He counts the flashes from the headland light even though it's daytime. Habit is a hymn. 2 letters are finished before dusk. Envelopes are addressed in a hand that never hurries. Gloucester, Portland, a cousin inland who still asks what tar smells like in winter and receives the same honest answer every time. Stamps go on like small flags. A bundle for tomorrow's sled sits in a shallow bowl so nothing will wander overnight. The church bell rings once more, a round period at the end of a short paragraph, and windows along the hill turn their lamps to a warmer key. Supper is simple on purpose. Fish cakes crisp in a skillet. Molasses ends up on someone's knuckle and is licked away with a grin. Tea pours the same soft ribbon it always does. Conversation walks rather than runs. A story about last year's storm told like weather remembered. A plan to tighten a chafeguard on Tuesday. A hope for a window in the wind on Thursday. No one checks the ropes because everyone did yesterday. Faith and preparation make good neighbours. Night takes off its hat and comes in kindly. The headland light resumes its round duty. The fog bell hums its measured truth in air that is no longer in a hurry. In the gear room, a lamp is turned down until the chimney clears like a thought. Knots on the table keep their shape without supervision. Upstairs, quilts that smell faintly of cedar and soap settle like easy burdens. Sunday does not change the harbour. It polishes it. Work will return with its clean arithmetic in the morning. Tar to kettle, rope to hand, seam to iron, and the day will be better for having been folded first. You sleep the way a line lies in a coil that someone made thoughtfully. No kinks, no surprises, ready to pay out smooth at first light. Morning arrives before morning, black turning to graphite where the headland keeps its slow blink. The harbour seems held in a mitten. Sound is soft, breath shows the shape of every sentence. Boots find wharf boards by memory. Ropes wear white moustache of rhyme. A skiff noses at the float like a dog ready to go. Lamps make small, obedient suns along the way. Gear room, pot shed, a single window in the rope walk, enough light to avoid invention. Thermoses are a later luxury. Today coffee rides warm in a lidded pail that also learned chowder yesterday. A heel of brown bread waits in a pocket. A wedge of cheese lives where a body can find it by habit. Oilskins shrug into their rolls. Wool learns the air quickly and then keeps it. A coil is paid out into the skiff with a sound like a book turning pages. A hand along a tar-dress bowline comes away scented of pine and patience, and somehow warm out past the floats. The cove holds its breath in a thin skin of ice where the tide allows. Oars lay two dark thoughts in the water. The skiff slides through its own quiet. Somewhere in the middle distance a bell taps itself awake, then remembers the planned interval and behaves. The point's light walks its measured arc. Stars bow to it and then resume their opinions. The channel, always honest, moves like iron that has agreed to be a liquid just for winter's sake. Soundings begin before dawn owns its colour. A lead, white-marked and honest, takes the news below, by the Mark 5. By the Deep 6. Good water for a small plan. The line, tar-sweet at the fathom marks, slides off a palm that forgot to keep its glove on and is forgiven. The boat answers with small decisions, trim here, ease there, until her wake feels like writing neat script on a blank page. Breath hangs around faces like thought balloons and drifts off to join the sky to tea the harbour mouth. A proposal is made and accepted. The swell says yes in a low vowel. The wind says perhaps. The headland light offers neither permission nor refusal, only count and promise. Outside, a long handline pays into dark water, lead and bait reasoning together. The sea is a gentleman of few words on mornings like this. Line tightens. Line dreams. Line comes home with a small, convincing news item, and the day has become a day. Coffee moves hand to hand as if it were a tool. A cup warms a wrist and then a story. The winter the lead froze to the rail and had to be peeled off like a stubborn label. The morning a seal shadowed the skiff all the way to the bell and back, as if to keep company rather than to ask questions. Laughter stays low so the line won't take offence. Bread goes across the boat, cheese follows. A pocket apple admits it is mostly memory and is enjoyed for that. Dawn is not a sudden thing at sea. It thins darkness by courtesies. First the horizon learns a language that isn't black. Then the water shows its working, steel to slate to something almost blue. Then the boats at anchor far inside become suggestions with names. Frost on gunnels loosens into beadwork and runs toward the scuppers with good manners. Fingers that forgot how many knots they know begin to remember all of them at once. A gull chooses the boat for a few silent circuits, paying the compliment of attention without the tax of noise. The line is paid, hauled, coiled, paid, hauled, coiled, the boat's pulse finding the day's tempo. Every so often. A hand checks chafe where tar met iron and says, quietly, still good. The skiff knows how to be exactly herself. Not a stage, not a hero. Just a shape that makes wet things useful when the low sun finally drops under the lid of cloud on the far edge of everything. It paints one stripe of brass across the cove and the harbour answers by appearing all at once. Floats. Posts, the ladder with frost combed off 2 rungs. The rope walk door thinking about opening. Smoke lifting straight up from the gear room. Inside the headland lens, a keeper's hand writes lamp out in a neat script. The bell returns to its unhurried rounds like a watch relieved. Return is work's gentlest part. The skiff kisses the float as if it had meant to all along. The line's tail is paid to a small coil that will be grateful later. The fish, modest and enough, meet the day without ceremony. A thumb smears a bit of tar on an eye that thought about fraying. A glove is padded onto a thwart to remember warmth. The pail, coffee now a dark gloss at the bottom, goes back to the shed to become chowder again. On the walk up from the water, the wharf boards are still themselves under the frost, steady, known, accepted. Doors greet in their morning shapes. A pencil mark appears on the door jamb where winter keeps its little truths. Out early, lead good, line served, back before sun. Inside, the stove clears its throat. The kettle decides to boil. A bowl remembers how to wear steam. The harbour, relieved of your absence, keeps time. And you, warm at the edges and salty in the middle, add another small, correct morning to a long ledger of them. When weather makes a doorway in the week, the mailboat slips through like a well-mannered guest. The cove steadies. The bell keeps its round truth. The headland light counts only for pride. Down the harbour, a small packet boat shoulders the channel, low, sure, with a deck that remembers summer and a wheelhouse trimmed in frost. Her horn offers one short hello that tastes of iron and patience. The wharf meets her with winter's choreography. Lines come aboard in tar-dark arcs. A turn around a timber, a hitch that won't forget itself. Cleats take hold with the good manners of iron that enjoys being useful. A gangplank finds its angle, and the villagers' errands wake from their tidy corners. Sacks of coal, a crate of oranges bright as promises, a battered tin for lamp oil, a bundle of newspapers tied with twine that smells faintly of shop heat. Each steps ashore with the gravity of treasure. Envelopes appear in a canvas bag lettered with towns up and down the coast. Stamps gleam like small, disciplined suns. The store by the wharf door feels bigger on mail days. Counters host a geography of necessity. Wick and polish, salt pork and molasses, twine and marlin, biscuits that keep forever and taste like something you can float on. The stove radiates a generous, center-of-room warmth. Gloves hang from a rope like winter fish. A chart lies open beneath a jar of hard candy, shoals familiar as cousins, soundings marked in pale, stubborn blue. Fingers trace headlands while the proprietor weighs nails with the confidence of someone who knows exactly how many you'll need and 3 more for luck. News is read at the speed of Thor. A letter carries the smell of a kitchen you've almost forgotten. A hand you recognize turns weather into sentences. Nor'easter Tuesday. Ice to inner float. Nets near mended. Oysters good if you can coax the channel. Someone unfolds a broadside from inland. Grain prices like rumors. A photograph of a city that looks too clean to be true. The village accepts what is useful and puts the rest away without malice. Gossip arrives in wool. A nod, a smile that says the bell will keep, the light will keep, we will keep. On the deck, crates swap directions. Outgoing parcels carry winter's handiwork. Cooper's casks stout with pickles. A short bundle of hoops tied like a promise. A coil of rope served and labelled in chalk. A jar of beach plum jam wrapped in last week's paper. The mailboat's mate writes in a little book with a pencil blunt from being honest. The figures are small, neat, and comfortingly ordinary. Snow skims the tarred lines and melts into a shine, children practice being necessary. One counts oranges into a box without tasting even one. Another carries a letter up the hill with both hands as if it were a bird. A third watches the mate splice a messenger into the hoist and learns the shape of the tuck by heart. A dog reads everything twice and finds no objection to any of it. Upstairs in the store office, a scale learns to weigh stamps and fudge with equal gravity. By noon. The packet's deck looks lighter in a way only winter knows. Provisions landed. Hopes parcelled. Small repairs agreed upon. The horn speaks again, polite as a farewell at a door. Lines run free. The gangplank rises like a closing thought. The mailboat gives her shoulders to the channel and goes, stern writing the village's name briefly in the water before it erases itself like good handwriting, back up the hill, doors thrown open. Oranges glow on a kitchen table like dock lights. Oil pours to the line in lamps that have kept their tempers all season. A coil of marlin finds its peg and looks right at home. The newspaper in the rope walk becomes a drop cloth under tar, and the photograph of the city hangs on a nail for 2 days before offering its square of sky to the stove. Letters are read aloud, then folded twice and tucked with others that smell of salt and ink and patience. Evening draws the map small again. The bell keeps its measured note. The light walks and walks. Packages lose their edges into rooms that are warmer for them. Someone writes a reply, "Tell Will the ice is polite." The cooper made a barrel that sings, "We are well," and sets it by the door for the next window in the weather. The harbour, having received and given, settles into the kind of quiet that feels like a good ledger closed. The fish house keeps a weather of its own, half sea, half ember. Outside, the cove wears pewter. Inside, air turns the colour of stories told near a stove. Floorboards know brine by name. Benches hold the gloss of 1,000 knives. A coil of twine naps on a peg like a tame gull. The faint, steady perfume is winter's pantry, salt drawn from a barrel with a wooden scoop. Smoke that learned patience. Fish that agreed to become February, splitting starts with discipline, not speed. Fish lay along a board like commas waiting for meaning. Hands choose the right edge of the blade and let the tool remember its work. Belly to back, spine to bucket, a clean and showy cut, then the quick salt, rub, fold, stack. A boy learns the angle that finds bone without complaint. An elder shows how a wrist can be kind and still exact. Buckets fill with neat truths. The stove hums one soft approval in the corner, and a kettle contributes to the weather without trying to be tea yet. Salt turns the room into a clock. A flake, a rack of laugh, receives each fish with the spacing of a hymn. Not crowding, not wasteful, every inch a reason. Brine pulls what it needs and leaves what matters. In weather that won't let the yard do its share, lines are stretched from beam to beam and made into a small, private sky. Fish hang like thin moons, a winter constellation arranged by hand. A ledger near the door adopts its favourite voice, fish laid, fish turned, fish ready, and the page grows calm as the work. Smoke belongs to a second room where a low fire never forgets itself. Apple and alder give slow blue notes. A damper narrows the day to the right kind of breath. Hooks carry strips and bellies across the warm dark, and time writes flavour along the edges. A door opens to stir the fog. A brush of wind moves through the vapour like a polite guest and leaves. When the door shuts, the smoke returns to its small grammar. Rise, think, rest outside. When the sky allows, flakes stand like stern laundry. Racks face the harbour with their narrow shoulders. Gulls consider and keep respectful distance, educated by a century of shouts and the persuasive logic of twine. A broom clears yesterday's skim of snow. Laths accept a palming of salt where a wet glint suggests too much faith. The bell walks its round note across the racks. Fish and wood and air learn to agree for a few hours at a time. Midday's warmth is portable. Chowder rides in a pail that used to hold nails. A slice of brown bread leans against the pot rim and catches steam like news. Salt is brushed from sleeve cuffs with the same affection given to snow. A knife is wiped and put down with the blade turned in, a courtesy learned long ago. Someone tells of the spring smelt run that once came early. Someone else admits they still look for it on black mornings because hope doesn't watch the calendar. By afternoon, the fish house breathes in measures. Fresh laid. Turned once. Turned twice. Ready. A hand tests a piece the way winter tests a rope. Thumb, forefinger, opinion. The right answer is firm. The wrong answer waits. Sacks are stenciled with a boat's name and the month, letters sure and plain. Cooper's casks, lined with a good thought, receive what's meant to travel. Bundles for neighbours, wrapped in paper that remembers a chart, receive what's meant to be eaten before Sunday. Cats keep the precincts the way deacons keep aisles, present, polite, efficient. Their tails curve like question marks that already know the answer. A gull lands with the attitude of a customer, remembers itself, and lifts off without entering the shop. Snow begins again without announcement. Someone checks the damper. Someone checks the flakes. Someone writes wind shifting on the jam and no one hurries. Dusk tightens the room to work and firelight. Hooks empty and shine in the smoke. The flake's last rack comes in with the day's cold still in its wood. The stove clicks down to a soft, red thought. Sacks are tied, labelled, stacked. A knife receives its stone and finds its quiet edge again. The ledger closes on a page that smells of salt and pencil and proof outside, The harbour keeps its own accounting, the bell counting, the light counting, the tide carrying. Windows along the hill take on the colour of butter. In one of them, a pan warms a slice of smoked fish next to eggs that remember summer. In another, a pot loosens brand-aid into spreadable comfort. Smoke from the low chimney writes a single, polite line into the evening, then forgets itself into weather. When the door is latched, the fish house stays awake a while longer. Heat finishes its slow arithmetic behind the closed dampers. Salt keeps whispering its reasons. Wood creaks as if taking attendance after school. Work will wait overnight in the exact way it needs to. The sea approves from a distance, the way a friend nods from across a room. Winter, fed and tidy, leans into the hill and falls asleep smiling. The smithy keeps its own small weather, coal glow, iron breath, the soft thunder of a bellows that never raises its voice. Outside, the cove is pewter. Inside, dusk arrives early and is welcomed by sparks that write quick constellations and vanish. The anvil stands like a winter altar. Hammers rest in a tidy choir. Tongs hang along a plank as neat as wrenches in a prayer book. Tar sneaks in on cuffs and stays. A good cousin to soot, iron begins the morning black and certain. By degrees it remembers colour. In the fire it blooms to cherry. At the anvil it flashes orange. In the water it sighs to steam and settles with the temper a boat can trust. A hook is drawn from square to octagon to round, shouldered, and curled. Hammer marks smoothed with a patient hand until usefulness looks inevitable. The ring is welded shut and dressed. The eye sits true. The piece clicks once against the anvil like a small vote for spring. Oarlocks ask for fairness. Bar stock heats, is bent around a hardy with a slow, sure pull, and tested with an or that has known the skiff for years. The U must be generous without being lazy. The pin must seat without sulking. A drift persuades. A hammer agrees. Brass washers, punched from a sheet that gleams like butter in winter light, are set aside to travel with a pair, quiet guardians against squeak and complaint. The set on the bench looks like a promise to the cove itself. Chain links learn to be plural. A single oval is shouldered and scarfed. Bright, then dull, then bright again. The weld disappears into honesty. Link meets link in a deliberate progression. A length pays out across the floor like a low, dark river. At the far end, a swivel waits to keep lines from learning bad habits. Tar will do its part later. For now, iron earns its patience one heat at a time. The shop smells of coal, hot scale, snow melting from cuffs, and a hint of linseed from the handle rack. A rasp sings on a stubborn edge. A file answers in a finer key. Punches are warmed before work so cold won't crack a will. Rivets glow like tiny suns in a ladle. Tongs deliver them to their marriages. Tick, 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 and the heads dome up with a courtesy that looks like ornament but is only care. A bucket keeps quench water shy of freezing. When the hiss comes, it sounds satisfied rather than surprised. Midday, a pail of chowder arrives and the fire keeps the spoons from remembering the wind. A boy is shown how colour talks. Dull red for bending, bright for moving, no colour at all for waiting your turn. He nods as if learning tide tables. A girl tries the bellows and learns the rhythm that makes heat without tantrum. Steady, steady, steady. Someone tells how a hinge once left too hard in a door made winter louder until the smith taught it to be kinder with one thoughtful temper. Afternoon narrows to small grammar. A dozen long-shanked hooks take their barbs, each point kissed by a stone that lives in a pocket. A thole pin receives a shallow groove where Anne all likes to think. A hasp finds its mate and closes with a low, correct click. A broken gaff tip comes in humble and leaves with a new steel tooth that will hold its tongue until asked to bite. The anvil keeps time. The smith's favoured hammer a low clock whose chime means enough. Outside, the bell thickens its note and then thins it again. Snow tests the roof and finds it agreeable. The forge catches a blue breath when air moves through the door. A thin, elegant flame at the edge of things, here and gone. A coat warms on a peg. A pair of mittens naps on a sill. Boots forget the last wet half hour and become willing again. Iron, which looks stern, is in a generous mood. Tools for neighbours. A latch for the fish house, A hem wait for a sail loft that asked nicely toward dusk. The day's arithmetic arranges itself on a cloth. Oarlocks, 2 pairs. Hooks, 12 and 2. Chain length to the mark. Hasps, 3. Thole pins, 5. Hinge, tempered. Chalk notes this on the jam where winter keeps its truths. Hammers are set down face away. Tongs hang with their mouths shut. The rake dresses the fire into a low red thought that will remember you in the morning. The anvil cools a degree and pretends not to miss the company. You step out carrying warmth like a shy lantern in your coat. The harbour breathes iron and salt. Tar answers from the sheds. The headland light counts distances as if iron could hear. A skiff knocks once at the float and stops. In the kitchen, an oarlock will be set on the table and admired for exactly 1 breath before supper. In the morning it will go to work and forget it was ever new. The smithy darkens behind you, holding its heat as politely as a stove banked for night. Winter, pleased by all this readiness, adds a line of stars for the walk home.